going to discuss changes in costs of pig buildings from 2015, 2021, and 2023. Thank you for this kind introduction. Why do we do this study? It's based on a very simple conclusion. When we talk to farmers, say farmer A, he'll say, okay, I built fattening units in 2021. So you will have a cost per building. So a couple of months later, you talk to another farmer, farmer B, and he said, okay, I built a similar fattening unit, but in 2023, it's not fully paid. And so we're still struggling to determine the origin of this measure. What has to do with the materials? What has to do with other factors? So depending on the geography, depending on the technical choices, all the providers, there are significant differences in cost. So we wanted to propose a standardized method for calculating a cost per unit so that we can compare, so that we don't compare apples and oranges, and so that also we can track evolution of these standardized costs and try to explain why they have been increasing in recent years. Step 1, this methodology was set up in 2015 and 21. The idea was to come into contact, to reach out to players such as inter-trade organizations, breeders, technical staff, and collect quotes for recent building projects. So 3 different methods: fully slatted floors, straw bedding, and organic farming. So 53 projects in 2015. Those other projects we recovered, and we recovered 72 projects in 2021. So the geographic breakdown, 50% of farms in the greater west area, and about 50% to the rest of the country. Now, in terms of physiology, the different stages, they reflect a construction trend. So a lot of fattening units, a lot of farrowing units, and the remaining 20% gestating rooms, post-weaning rooms, and board pans. So here's the breakdown. A building project can be broken down as different building trades, 6 of them. So in an ideal world, you'll have 1 quote per trade. And it's better to get several quotes for a single trade so that you can compare the costs and get your hands on blueprints. That'll be very useful for step 2. So step 2, here's a hands-on case. Create a database with standardized costs based on which you can determine the maximum or the minimum average cost. So here's the user study: 600 fattening units, so 1 square meter per pig. And then you realize that's not all there is to it, and the farmer took that opportunity to set up an airlock or add silos, maybe a liquid manure pit on the outside. So you use the quote and you allocate them. Part of the quote is about material, and then the fattening unit, and then all of the ancillaries. Secondly, when we build something, we need to make sure that in terms of price comparison, we're dealing with similar equipment. So we'll have farmers who will invest into specific equipment based on their own specific constraints. For example, cooling systems. See the red square on the photograph? You don't see cooling systems in every farrowing unit. So if you factor that into the cost, this means the cost is higher, but simply because there's a little more equipment available. So specific costs have been factored out, and we harmonized the surface area. Because of fattening a surface area, we redo the calculation so we can work on the basis of 0.7 square meters. So we don't compare apples and oranges. So what we do is compare standardized costs. So that's the methodology we set up in 2015 and 2021. In 2023, we used a slightly different method to adapt to the strong upsurge in cost, and we based ourselves on the INSEE's Institute BT indices. So these are building or construction indices, which are published by INSEE every month. And we look at changes, cost of concrete, cost of copper, cost of zinc, gutters, etc. On a monthly basis, you have different work packages. Step 1, identify the INSEE indices that apply to each work package. Secondly, determine the weight of each work package in the global cost of that particular unit. For example, for firing units, earthworks doesn't represent a lot of cost, so just 1.5%, but interior design is 37%. So you have a reference cost. The benchmark cost dates back to 2021, and you look at changes in the index between 21 and 2023. You weight it based on how much this represents of the total cost, and then you recalculate the standardized cost. That's the methodology we set up in 2023. Next, you end up with an average cost. So you have different types of housing systems, blocked firing unit. You don't have a lot of straw bedding for firing units, and you have fully slotted floors, and you have organic farms. Now, for farrowing and fattening, because that's where most of the quotes went to. Generally speaking, when you talk about average costs, you're never too comfortable because you have a range of costs that can be pretty broad. So you're always more comfortable talking about not cost, but cost ranges, because it all depends on the technical choices that are made, and the price varies, how thick the wall is, for example. Look at fattening units with fully slotted floor. This ranges between 500 or 800 per unit, 800 euros per unit. Now, changes in average cost for firing units. You have the two types, a blocked firing unit, organic farming, and fully slotted floors. Between 2015 and 2023, from the lighter color to the darker color, you find a 60% difference in construction cost for a firing unit. Now, for fattening units, here's the trend. For fully slotted floors or organic farming, similar, a 40% difference. And for straw bedding, the cost soared, plus 143% in the course of 8 years. I'll get back to that in a minute. Conclusion. If you want to look at the changes in cost of pig farms, there's one indicator that is very reliable. You need to look at crates on fully slatted floors. It gives you good visibility. And clearly, there's an acceleration in the upsurge in costs between 2015 and 2021. The cost increased by 22%. And in the course of 2 years, between 23 and 25, we have the same upsurge. So clearly, cost per unit is skyrocketing. Obviously, COVID had an impact, cost surged, and also there was a combination of circumstances, supply problems for a number of construction materials, particularly because of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Now, what about the connection between the Ifip cost? Like I said, it's a standardized cost and can be used for comparison purposes over the years. And that's completely different than the turnkey cost. Usually that's the so-called field-driven cost or the cost presented by the farmer. Now the goal of the turnkey cost is to make sure everything works. So if you want to lengthen the pipe for liquid manure so you can connect it to the existing pit, fine. If you want to add a shed so you will house the cooling towers, fine. That's what you call the turnkey cost. So by definition, it'll be slightly higher than the Ifip cost because, again, you need to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. So upgrading straw bedding. For a long time, these were buildings that were poorly insulated. Sometimes there was zero insulation. There was basically 4 walls with a roof on top. And usually those were buildings that used to be used for something else. And the trend has shifted completely. Those buildings used to be cheap. Not anymore. Now farmers put their heads together and they try to insulate the roofing structure. Here's an example on the left-hand side. Or rather the right-hand side, you have insulated concrete panels and you have refrigerated doors to ensure a seal. So can you manage the area where the straw bedding is accumulated? So clearly the trends are shifting and things are becoming more sophisticated. Straw bedding is a system that is becoming more sophisticated so as to reduce the inputs being used, Now, the trend is different. The surface per pig is smaller than it used to be because you try to achieve similar growth performance as for fully slatted floors, but you do it with straw bedding, and the idea, of course, is to reduce the working time and make your job easier. So, by way of conclusion, let's look at the prospects. I presented 3 main housing types in this analysis. As you can clearly see, there's a new generation of buildings that is emerging in the field. Those are buildings that often revolve around animal welfare, societal expectations on that front, and the slogan is, let the pig decide. So you'll have different types of flooring, fully slatted floors, or straw bedding, or a mixture of both. You'll have cool areas, warmer areas, areas that are darker, areas that are lighter, etc. But there aren't enough such buildings that have emerged in the field so you can have standardized costs. But if they continue to grow and become more widespread, it's not impossible that a third type will emerge, a third category will emerge, and I hope to include that in my presentation in a couple of years. Thank you very much for your attention, and many thanks also to the farmers and the professionals that I talked to for sharing with me their feedback. Can you imagine? I would never have been able to tell you all that I told you today if it hadn't been for the quotes and the verbatims that they shared with me. Thank you so much.